Writers fashion their ideas into interesting and wonderful short stories. Their works are included in the 9th annual compilation, one-of-a-kind original short stories by APL Teens. Now, I'd like to say that the cover is done by one of our artists in the short story workshop. She did this for us. I'm going to say it right. Afia Jamal did the cover for us. Has began running at age 11, and she enjoys reading and writing and crocheting. Mikayla has 5 siblings: Andrew, Aaron, Nicholas, Jordana, and Hannah. Mikayla is in homeschool in the 10th grade. In this wonderful historical tale, a young family travels from their home in Sweden to America, and Meredith learns to trust God and lean on Him when confronting obstacles and disappointments in their new home.
April 1887. Beads of perspiration trickled down the side of her face, while a burning sensation swept through her shoulders. "One more step," she repeated. "I can do this. Just one more step." Crowding the street, people made it nearly impossible for her to pass. She felt like she was going to faint if she didn't get clean air soon. The smell of rotting fish and spoiled fruit permeated the air. "I have to run if I'm going to make it in time," she thought. She began racing through the city streets, skillfully dodging vendors and carriages. Soon the air smelled like the salty sea, helping her to breathe easier. The item in her hands weighed heavily, but she had almost reached her destination. Finally, in the midst of the crowded dock, she spied the people she had been coming to meet: her Aunt Greta, Uncle Carson, and their 2 children. Relieving her of the heavy burden, Uncle Carson exclaimed, "Ah, Meredith, you've come. We were beginning to worry about you. I see you were able to get the jerky we sent you for?" Wearily watching this exchange were Meredith's cousins, 6-year-old Inga and 2-year-old Gregor. Meredith Johansson gently took little Inga's hands into her own and followed her aunt and uncle to the ferry, where they had handed over their tickets and boarded the boat. As soon as the Johansson family entered the small cabin, Meredith settled Inga on her lap, and the exhausted child immediately fell asleep. Carson, Greta, and Gregor also lay down for a nap, leaving Meredith alone with only her thoughts to keep her company. Both of her parents had died from cholera when Meredith was 11 years old. Her father's brother, Carson, and his wife took Meredith into their home shortly after their own daughter, Inga, was born. One of Meredith's favorite memories was of her father pulling her up onto his knee and telling her why they named her Meredith. She could almost hear her father's voice as he spoke. "Roughly 6 months ago, after your ma and I were married, an Englishwoman came and taught at the village school. She had an incredible talent with children, and we admired her greatly. Your ma and I became friends with her. Her name was Miss Meredith Taylor. So when you were born, we named you Meredith Taylor Johansson. Sadly, when you were but 3 years old, she married and moved away, back to England." That was one of the last memories she had had of her father. The journey on the ferry across over the North Sea consisted of 2 days, during which Inga and Greta became seasick, leaving Meredith in charge of Gregor. At last, someone sighted land, and England came into view. Meredith decided to fix her hair before they departed off the ferry. Her blue eyes focused on the task of braiding and wrapping her waist-length hair into a bun at the nape of her neck. Her mother had always loved the color of Meredith's white blonde hair, which she had said was beautiful against Meredith's fair skin. After dressing, Meredith began packing their things into the trunk they had brought along. Laying down the children's clothing, she glimpsed some things that reminded her of her home back in Sweden. There was a portrait of her mother and her father right after they were married, and another family portrait when Meredith was 6 years old. Underneath these lay some silver candlesticks which belonged to Aunt Greta. Nestled carefully near the bottom lay Meredith's most cherished possession, her mother's music box. Her mother had adored that music box, which was made of furnished cherry wood trimmed in gold. It was a beautiful sight to behold, and Meredith's mother had passed it on to her. Meredith promised her dying mother she would take care of it and that nothing would ever happen to it. Her mother had warned her not to become too attached to the music box because the Bible says, "Do not lay up treasures on earth for yourselves, where moth and rust corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Closing the lid of the trunk, she struggled not to cry. Their deaths had been hard for her to bear, but the Lord had sent his comfort to her, and she strived to rest in his loving arms.
What? That's what I said. I should just go back to me.